Okay, so you know how everyone's always talking about these like super exciting new markets for businesses?
Hmm.
Well, Costa Rica is definitely one that comes up all the time, right?
Mm,
And it just seems like a place that's absolutely bursting with potential. But um,
totally.
I think for a lot of companies that leap into international expansion, it can feel like a pretty daunting puzzle to solve.
Oh, yeah. It can be super overwhelming, especially if you're not already familiar with how things work there on the ground.
And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. We're going to explore how to really simplify that process of expanding into Costa Rica.
Okay.
And specifically, we'll focus on how companies can quickly and compliantly hire and manage employees in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
So basically, how to avoid a lot of that bureaucratic headache that usually comes with going global.
Right. Because you want to be efficient, but you also absolutely have to make sure that you're operating legally from the very beginning.
Exactly. And that's where things like professional employer organizations or PEOs and employers of record EORs come into play.
Hmm.
They offer a much more streamlined approach.
Yeah, they're becoming increasingly popular for international expansion.
For sure. Now, I know those terms, PEOs and ERs, might sound a little jargony, but they're actually quite clever solutions for handling international hiring and HR.
Hmm.
And we'll focus on how a company like INS Global uses these methods to help businesses, just like yours, expand into Costa Rica. So they provide these PEO and EOR services, and their whole model is built around making that international move a whole lot smoother.
Yeah, the landscape of global expansion has really evolved, hasn't it?
Right.
I mean, instead of going through that traditional route of setting up a full-blown legal entity right away, which can take forever and cost a ton of money,
Oh, tell me about it.
PEOs and EORs let companies be a lot more agile and efficient.
Absolutely. So let's dig into the advantages here. When you're specifically looking at Costa Rica, what makes using a PEO or an EOR such a smart move right from the get-go?
I think a huge one is regulatory assurance.
Yeah.
I mean, Costa Rican labor laws, just like anywhere else, have their own very specific rules.
Right.
And by partnering with someone like INS Global, you're essentially tapping into a team of specialists who live and breathe those local regulations.
Makes sense.
And that's not just about saving you time, it's also about actively shielding you from some pretty serious legal missteps.
Hmm.
You know, even seemingly small errors in things like contract language or how you administer benefits can lead to significant fines and penalties.
Yeah, trying to navigate a whole new country's employment laws when you're not familiar with them sounds like a recipe for
It
disaster.
really can be.
So having that expert guidance built in is a massive weight off your shoulders.
Totally agree.
What about the actual setup process, getting your operations up and running? How does that work with a PEO or EOR?
That's another big advantage. Reduce setup time and costs. I mean, think about the traditional way of setting up a company in a new country. You're easily looking at months, maybe even a year, to get everything squared away from a legal standpoint.
Right.
With a PEO like INS Global, you can often be operational in Costa Rica literally within days.
Days. Wow, that's a game changer.
It is. And that speed also translates directly into cost savings because you're not shelling out for those hefty upfront legal fees and ongoing administrative costs of setting up a whole new entity.
I see. So it's a much smarter use of your resources, especially in those crucial early stages of expansion.
Exactly. And it also significantly simplifies the ongoing HR side of things, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, an INS Global PEO takes on a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to your people. You know, things like finding the right talent, getting them onboarded, running payroll, and handling all the general HR administration.
Yeah.
That frees up your core team to really focus on what they're best at, which is, your strategic goals
Yeah.
and actually growing your business in the Costa Rica market.
So you can tap into that local talent pool, but let INS Global handle all the employment stuff while you concentrate on the bigger picture.
Precisely. And this all ties into that rapid market access we talked about earlier. You're not stuck waiting for months for your legal framework to be finalized. You're essentially paying one monthly fee to INS Global, and you're good to go in your target market much faster than you could ever do on your own.
It's almost like they provide the local infrastructure and you just plug in and start working.
Exactly. It's a much cleaner and less complex way to operate, especially when you're first starting out.
And it keeps your company structure in Costa Rica a lot leaner, at least initially. Instead of managing multiple teams and departments for HR, you've got that single point of contact through INS Global.
Exactly. And when you consider everything, the regulatory compliance, the speed, the streamlined HR, partnering with a PEO or EOR like INS Global really does take away a significant amount of risk and gives you much stronger legal footing compared to trying to figure it all out yourself or setting up a whole subsidiary from scratch.
I'm with you on that the benefits are pretty clear now. I know the terms PEO and EOR often get thrown around together. Can we clarify what the actual difference is between the two?
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. While both PEOs and EORs help with international expansion, they work in slightly different ways.
Okay.
Think of a PEO as more of a co-employer. They provide HR services to your employees. You still maintain a direct employment relationship with your team in Costa Rica. So they're essentially handling the HR functions for the people you've already hired there.
Got it. So they're taking care of the HR side for your existing employees in Costa Rica.
That's right now. An EOR, on the other hand, actually becomes the legal employer of your staff in Costa Rica.
Oh, I see.
So the employment contract is between the employee and the EOR, like INS Global in this scenario, and the EOR takes on all the legal responsibilities of being the employer. So with an EOR, they're not just providing services, they're legally the employer on record.
That makes sense. And INS Global offers both PEO and global EOR services in Costa Rica, which gives companies some flexibility depending on their needs and how they want to structure their international team.
Exactly. So let's say a company decides to go with INS Global's PEO in Costa Rica. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, they've got a pretty straightforward 4-step process.
Okay.
First, they sit down with you to really understand your specific needs and create a tailored plan for your expansion into Costa Rica. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all solution. They really customize it to your situation.
I like that personalized approach.
Oh, yeah, it makes a big difference. Then the second step is INS Global putting the necessary legal structure in place.
Okay.
And that's where their local expertise really comes in handy. They make sure you have the right framework to bring your staff into Costa Rica legally and compliantly. So they're essentially setting up that essential foundation from a legal perspective.
Makes sense. And then what?
All right, so the third step is where INS Global takes over all the day-to-day stuff hiring and all the HR services for your employees in Costa Rica.
Got it.
So that covers everything from onboarding to running payroll and managing benefits. They basically handle all those routine HR tasks for you.
So you can focus on the bigger picture.
Exactly. And the final step is all about making sure your team can operate smoothly and helping your company achieve its global expansion goals by taking that HR burden off your plate. INS Global allows you to stay focused on growth and hitting your targets in that Costa Rican market.
Sounds pretty streamlined.
It is to really appreciate the value here. Maybe we should touch on some key aspects of Costa Rican labor law just to give our listeners a sense of what they need to be aware of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A basic understanding of the local rules is crucial. For example, employment contracts in Costa Rica have to be in writing in Spanish,
Okay.
and they must clearly spell out the employee's rights, benefits, and how they'll be compensated. And that's all in Costa Rican colones, not in another currency.
Interesting. So you can't just use US dollars or euros.
Right. And while you can technically have verbal contracts, those are only for very short-term temporary work up to a maximum of 90 days.
Okay.
And probation periods usually last for about 3 months.
Got it. Good to know about the language and currency requirements for contracts. What about work hours and overtime?
So the standard work week in Costa Rica is capped at 48 hours.
Right.
But night work, which is anything between 7 p.m. and 5 a.m., has even stricter limits, no more than 6 hours a day or 36 hours a week.
Wow. Okay.
And for shifts that include both day and night work, if the night portion is longer than 3 hours, the total can't exceed 42 hours a week.
Pretty specific.
It is. And then for overtime, employees are entitled to be paid 50% more than their usual hourly rate with a daily cap of 4 overtime hours.
Makes sense. So pretty clear rules around work hours and overtime pay. What about things like bonuses and vacation time?
So every employee in Costa Rica gets a Christmas bonus, which is essentially an extra month's salary.
Rah, that's generous.
It is. And it has to be paid sometime between December 1st and 20th.
Okay.
And for time off, there are 9 national holidays where employees who have to work get double pay.
Nice.
And for annual leave, employees get 15 paid vacation days after they've worked for at least 50 weeks. They can split this time into 2 separate blocks, and any unused vacation days can only be carried over if the employee couldn't take them because of work demands.
I see. So it's use it or lose it unless work prevents you from taking it.
Exactly. Now, this mandatory Christmas bonus can really catch companies off guard, especially if they're not familiar with Costa Rican labor law.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
It can impact their cash flow planning if they haven't budgeted for it, but that's a prime example of a nuance that a PEO like INS Global proactively handles for you.
They've got you covered. What happens if employees get sick or need to take family leave?
For sick leave, employees who've been contributing to Social Security are eligible for up to 365 days.
Wow, a whole year.
Yeah, for the first 3 days they're sick, they get their full pay. Half of that comes from the employer and the other half from the state.
Okay.
From the fourth day onwards, the state covers 60% of their salary.
Got it.
Now, for maternity leave, mothers get 1 month off before the birth and 3 months after. And during that time, they receive 100% of their salary split evenly between their employer and the state.
Pretty standard.
As of 2022, paternity leave is 2 days off per week for the first 4 weeks after the baby is born.
All right. And what about adoption?
It's important to note that adoptive parents in Costa Rica jointly receive 3 months of paid leave with the same payment rules as maternity leave.
Interesting. So they both get time off.
Exactly. Plus, mothers get an hour of paid time off each day for breastfeeding.
Wow. So Costa Rica seems to have quite comprehensive regulations around leave and benefits. What about taxes and Social Security contributions?
As of 2022, the corporate tax rate in Costa Rica is 30% for companies with a gross annual income above around 112 million colons.
Okay.
And there are lower rates for companies making less than that.
Makes sense.
Personal income tax ranges from 10 to 25% for annual income above about 3.8 million colons.
All right.
Both employees and employers have to contribute to Social Security. Employees typically pay around 10.5%, while employer contributions can range from about 26.5 to 34.5%.
Got it. And what about VAT?
The standard VAT rate in Costa Rica is 13%. And all these different rules and regulations can be pretty overwhelming for companies that are new to Costa Rica.
Yeah, no kidding.
Even something that seems as straightforward as payroll can become incredibly complex, where all the Social Security contributions and taxes that need to be calculated and withheld correctly.
So are you saying that even small mistakes could lead to big problems?
Oh, absolutely. Even seemingly minor errors in things like contract language or how you administer benefits can result in hefty fines.
That's a good point. It really highlights how valuable it is to have expert guidance from someone who knows the ins and outs of Costa Rican labor law.
I completely agree. Now, some companies might be thinking, well, why can't I just hire people directly using my existing company in another country?
Right. Why go through all this trouble with a PEO or EOR?
Well, it seems straightforward.
So you can't just use your existing company structure from, say, the US or Canada.
Not usually. Each country has its own very specific rules, and you need to follow those to avoid any legal issues.
So you can't assume that your current employment agreements and payroll systems will automatically work when you hire someone in Costa Rica.
Nope, not at all. And this is where foreign companies have a choice to make. They can either set up their own local subsidiary or use a local PEO or EOR like INS Global to hire staff directly.
So essentially, they need to choose between doing it themselves or partnering with a specialist.
Exactly. And that decision often comes down to a few factors. How quickly do they want to get up and running at Costa Rica? How much risk are they willing to take on? And what kind of internal resources do they have to dedicate to this expansion?
So if they have a really robust HR department, but just need help with local compliance and payroll in Costa Rica, a PEO might be a good fit.
Exactly. And if they're a smaller company looking to enter the market quickly with a smaller team and they want to minimize their legal and administrative overhead, an EOR becomes a more attractive option.
Makes sense. So it's about finding the right solution for your specific circumstances.
It is, a good analogy might be to think of a PEO like a co-pilot for your HR in Costa Rica. You're still flying the plane, but they're helping you navigate the complexities of the local airspace.
I like that. And an EOR is more like chartering a local airline. They're
Yeah.
responsible for the entire flight and the crew.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the time frame for each of these options. How long does it typically take to get things up and running?
Okay, so for a PEO like INS Global, how long does it usually take to onboard a new employee in Costa Rica?
Typically, it takes about 1 month to get an employee fully onboarded, and that includes all the necessary legal and HR steps.
1 month, that's pretty quick. What about setting up your own legal entity?
That could take a lot longer. We're usually talking anywhere from 4 to 12 months, depending on the complexity of setting up the legal and administrative infrastructure.
Wow, so that's a pretty significant difference both in time and, I imagine, cost.
It is.
So when you weigh those months of setup against having your team up and running in Costa Rica potentially within weeks through a PEO or EOR, the advantages become really clear.
Absolutely. It's all about getting to market faster, lowering your initial cost, reducing the administrative burden, and making sure you're operating legally and compliantly.
To wrap things up, it sounds like for companies that are serious about expanding into Costa Rica, partnering with a PEO or EOR like INS Global is a really compelling solution.
I completely agree. You get speed built-in expertise on local labor laws
Yeah.
and a significant reduction in the complexity of international expansion.
Right. And INS Global can really help companies navigate those often intricate HR processes and legal requirements that come with operating in Costa Rica.
They can.
So, considering the speed and reduced risk, we've talked about how could leveraging a PEO like INS Global accelerate your company's growth in global markets.
It's worth considering for sure.
If you're thinking about making that move into Costa Rica, we highly recommend reaching out to INS Global today and tell them about your expansion project. Their team can help you explore how they can support your international hiring needs and really set you up for success.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive today. We'll catch you next time.
See you then.